Hi there, wellness enthusiasts. It's Lisa Starr back with another episode of StarrCast. This is actually going to be episode 40 in season 9. Wow, we've been talking a lot since September. Really excited to have today's guest with us because he has a lot to share about wellness real estate, and he has taken a fascinating route into the business, which he will share with us. It's David Dronet from Olympus Real Estate Group. He began his career in finance and real estate development and then became involved in senior living, and now is through Olympus Real Estate running 2 of the largest and most impressive thermal bathing facilities in the United States. And he has a great story to tell about how that happened. We're going to explore how a real estate investor evaluates a wellness property, why he chose to enter the operational and complex world of hospitality, and what it takes to restore a historic health resort. I'm also going to ask David to share with us where he sees the next opportunities in wellness real estate, because he obviously has a very good compass for this. So thank you for joining us, David.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Lisa.
So with most guests, I often go back to your journey because many people listening want to work in wellness. They don't really see the path because, frankly, the path isn't that clear. You don't go to college and get a degree in wellness, right? So you went to school for what? Like, what did you think you would come out and do when you finished college initially?
I knew I wanted to eventually work for myself. So when I went into college, I studied business and chose to focus on finance within the first 6 to 12 months of college. And I didn't necessarily have Wall Street aspirations for finance, but I really enjoyed the idea of understanding the money and financial side of business to help support entrepreneurial aspirations.
Well, it's important to understand the money. After all, that's what makes everything go round. You got to make the money work. So you went to university, you come out with a degree in finance. What happens next?
Before I finished my degree, I had already started working in banking. And when I graduated, I continued working in that space and eventually started my first small commercial bank. And that was really my first business, focused on residential and commercial lending back in those days. And
Wait, you started your own bank?
well, yeah, you make it sound bigger than it was, but we right we grew into a small banking platform. Yes.
Not many people can say they started their own bank. So why? What was wrong with the banks that existed?
Yeah, I think it's something I've learned over my career, and sometimes it's a detriment. Sometimes I think largely it's a positive. I'm never really satisfied with the status quo. I always think that there's room for improvement. Being able to provide different tools or provide our customers with greater ease of access. So I think it's just my nature to want to grow and improve. And sometimes when I'll run into roadblocks or obstacles, the answer can often be, we just need to do it ourselves, as opposed to rely on outside third parties.
So you start a bank. How long did you run the bank?
We were only around for 4 or 5 years, and then I actually sold to my partners and moved on to my next venture, which was in real estate development.
Because why? Did you see an opportunity in real estate?
Yeah, I wasn't finding the fulfillment in banking. It was strictly financial. And so that's another thing that
Banking's not very fun, is it?
That's right. And something I've also found, and I think it connects to my kind of arc, is I've made gradual progression towards things that are more and more fulfilling for me personally. And I find that fulfillment through impact on our team and the guests or the communities we work in. So after I left my time in banking, I moved into real estate development, which was probably a real natural fit for me. With my father was a plumber and a plumbing contractor growing up, and my mother was a real estate agent. And so I kind of had this, real estate and construction upbringing. So I was used to that environment and felt familiar with it.
That
So,
language
yeah.
was familiar and comfortable to you. So, where does one start? Do you buy something? Do you develop something when you want to become a developer? What's the path?
Yeah, great question. And it actually describes some of my trajectory. So there's like a circular logic in commercial real estate development, and that is to raise money, you have to have a track record. But to get a track record, you have to raise money. And so I made a choice back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, to move from San Diego, where real estate is expensive. And in order to do a commercial project, a substantial amount of capital is needed. And I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where commercial real estate is more affordable. And I could actually, with my own financing or limited raising of capital outside of my own, I could do commercial projects of scale. And so I moved to that market after quite a bit of time of looking into different locations that I felt provided an opportunity. Moved there and began with some multifamily and commercial office projects in Albuquerque.
And so that went well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, actually, it didn't. Didn't entirely go well. This was while I was in this development space. 2007, 2008 roll around, and it was
Okay.
pretty. It was pretty devastating. Um, but it was in the seeds of that time that I had begun exploring senior housing. And one of the reasons Albuquerque was interesting to me was affordability, weather, and things that really suited a aging baby boomer population. So I had been researching senior housing for a while, and then I had a experience with my grandmother. My grandfather passed away, and we quickly learned that her dementia was much further along than any of us were aware. In the process of my mother and her siblings and us helping and looking for a place for her to help care with her advanced dementia, it was pretty staggering to me to find the limited options that were available and that were of quality. And this is for someone this is in a major market in San Diego, had resources through family and others to be able to afford it. But the options that were available were pretty limited. It was, I think, the combination of that personal experience and my real estate background and research that I'd been doing in the space up to that time that really pushed me towards that being my sole focus for an extended period of time. And I would also say, connecting back to our earlier conversation, it was the next step towards a more fulfilling venture. And so from there, I spent a little over a decade working in senior housing, and with partners built out a portfolio of senior housing properties through several states throughout the South. And it was great experience, and learned a lot about operationally intensive real estate and real estate and businesses that are very operator centric. And it's critical that the operations play a heavy role on what the space looks like, how the real estate is developed, and how to ultimately satisfy the customer.
That seems like a tough place to start, like a difficult one. I mean, it's hospitality, but people live there, they never go home. You're on 24/7. It sort of connects real estate, healthcare, and hospitality, which maybe you didn't see in the other developments when your grandmother became ill. It often does take that personal story, to really get you invested in a vertical.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that to be true. Colleagues and friends I still have that are in the space, there oftentimes is a personal connection. I also don't know how much of it actually comes after the fact, because I think we all are going to deal with those situations at some point in our lives. So it's common to find the connection before or during work in that space.
Well, we do need a solution in this country for sure. I look at what they do in some other countries and it just seems so much more advanced. But that's not the topic of this podcast. We won't go there. So you had multiple units, it sounds like, at some point of senior living facilities.
Yeah, we build 10 properties across 3 states.
And I'm guessing you exited that at some point.
Yeah, the development side of it, we really built out the 10 property portfolio, and then I exited the development business, and we just collectively had satisfied the portfolio. And then the individual assets we kept for a period of time and sold them off incrementally over the following several years. Still have a few owned today.
Tell us how you became interested in hot springs. I mean, I've read that you began using hot springs and hydrotherapy when you were doing high altitude mountaineering training. Is that true?
Yeah, that's the short story. That 10 years plus in the real estate development space and senior living across several states had me on the road 3 weeks out of the month often. And at this time, I had started a family, had three small children. This is back in 2016. Three small children. One was my youngest was 6 months, 6 months, 2 years, and 4 years old at that time.
Oh, that's a lot to leave the wife with for 3 weeks a month.
Yeah, exactly right. And my wife and I talked quite a bit. And, I was living out of a suitcase, eating steak dinners, with entertaining guests and or investors and partners and so on. And, just wasn't feeling great. And, the combination of it was time to close up our build out of the portfolio, and I needed to be off the road. And so I really started to turn my attention to my own personal health and well being and being home more. And so after selling the senior housing development business, my wife and I talked about, how do we not repeat that? And how do we spend more time together? And lastly, how do we spend more time in places that we really enjoy? And so during our time in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we were introduced to a town just north in southern Colorado called Pagosa Springs. And so Pagosa Springs has been a place that my wife and I loved visiting while we were there and have taken our kids to since. So we've been going to Pagosa Springs for 20 years now. Um, and it was shortly after selling the senior housing development business and talking, it was probably within a few months of that we heard through some friends of ours that the resort in Pagosa may be for sale. And at first it was a interesting connection between real estate development and investment and a place that we enjoy going. But back to my connection with the hot springs, I had also started in my efforts to kind of get healthier, started to train, and I had a coach, and he had been talking me through and asking me to use contrast therapy and water-based recovery methods as I was preparing for some mountaineering. And so these three things came together at the same time, and it just, it felt natural. I also really appreciated the irreplaceable nature of that property in Pagosa Springs. It holds such a special place in the town, the history of the town and the region, and really just brings a lot of character. As I thought it'd be a wonderful property to steward for some period of time. So we ultimately decided to pursue the purchase of that resort.
So it was really kismet. Just things came together in a way you couldn't have planned.
Yeah, as a finance guy and a business person who is generally analytical, I will say that my journey, and I think most people's, we can pretend it's all arranged or planned, but I really do think there's just a lot of luck. I think it was fortuitous that these events occurred, and maybe there's a reason for it. So get to this next step, and it really feels like this is where I'm supposed to be. All the pieces were aligning well, and it feels like the journeys of the past or the events of the past had prepared me uniquely to be in this position.
Yes, imagine what could have happened if you'd never been to Pagosa Springs when you were unfamiliar with it and someone said this place is for sale and you're like, well, whatever. You wouldn't have had that connection that you did. So lucky for them. So when you purchased the property was 2018, is that correct? And it had 79 rooms and 25 mineral pools, which is quite a few. How did you decide what to do next with what you had just bought?
Yeah, well, even before we purchased the property, I'd worked with our team and we put together a plan for what we think we could improve to bring more value to the customers, and kind of elevate the experience. There were some physical improvements, adding a food and beverage offering that really hadn't been at the property. Despite having the rooms, there wasn't a breakfast option or much food options. There was just simply really a bar in the pool area that offered some snacks. That was it. So food and beverage. We also renovated the bathhouse, really upgrading the aesthetics and the layout and the flow there, and did similar upgrades to hotel rooms and various spaces around the property to kind of improve the quality of the setting. That was our initial plan, and we executed that plan over the first several years, really completing that in 2021 before contemplating, expanding the resort further.
So, your experience as a real estate person growing up and running that business helped you certainly with some of that, but not knowing how to fix up a bathhouse, you certainly didn't have any experience in that. So, did you choose people to help you?
Yes, you know, I'll just say the people we work with are really, I think, the difference makers between how much we're able to accomplish. We've been very fortunate to have worked with some great people on our team, as well as third party consultants. And so we worked and identified folks to help with design, bringing character to those spaces, food and beverage groups that help with flow and optimizing space. But ultimately, I think we also pulled our team in, the team on the ground who was actually engaging with the guest. And we always ensured their feedback and their input was captured in those plans. So they weren't just getting a hot potato tossed at them when the project was done and expected to figure it out. So, yeah, we've had some great operating partners. And the general manager at the resort has been with us since really late 2018, or 6 months after we acquired the resort. He joined us and has been the general manager since, and is just a strong leader and a great, great partner and friend.
Good hires. So, you said you get into 2021 and you've sort of renovated it, but you hadn't expanded it.
Correct.
And what was the impetus for going the next step at that point? In the middle of COVID, I might add.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we, like everyone, for a moment in time, COVID was very impactful. We shut down for a short period of time, and then we're open with various restrictions. But ultimately, as we were getting to 2021, I think our location, outdoor environment, health and wellness, remote in nature, really we benefited from the migration patterns and people wanting to get out of the city. And so, um, yes, it was in the midst of COVID, but we had also reached a point prior to COVID where we were selling out every weekend. The hotel was full. Yeah, and we were very high occupancy throughout the entire busy season, Memorial Day to Labor Day, and almost every other weekend beyond that. And so we knew that there was unmet demand, and we could look at our reservations and denial reports that say we couldn't offer a room to somebody because we were sold out. And so we had a sense, and we underwrote that there was unmet demand there. We were able to see that for a few years. And then the last thing was we were taking a lot of consumer insight and guest surveys and gathering information, holding interviews to learn what our customers, what they were really visiting for, what impact we were truly having on them, what things they enjoyed and didn't enjoy. We took all of that information to heart, and we wanted to evolve further in the wellness direction, as opposed to just hot springs being kind of a beach in the mountains where you just go to get in a bathing suit and get in water, which is wonderful, to be clear. It was all those things that said we'd actually reached a ceiling with the existing resort. We were kind of hitting the limit on what we could, I think, effectively charge for rooms, given our offering, given the quality and age of the facilities. And an expansion provided two opportunities, among others. One is to serve the unmet demand and continue the growth we were seeing. And the second was to level up the offering that we had, the amenities bets, the room qualities, the spa quality, the pools, and create spaces that met our customers' desires and even exceeded them. And so the expansion served that purpose. It allowed us to serve that unmet demand well and grow and really provide a runway for us to continue to level up over the foreseeable future, really.
So you more than doubled your room count, your key count. You doubled your pool count. I mean, did you have to take on more real estate to do that, to fit all of this?
Yes. When we acquired the resort in 2018, there was an adjacent parcel of land, roughly 20 acres. And, we knew that land provided great opportunity for us to grow, also provided additional water resources to be able to add pools. And so I actually went to work in 2018 and 2019 on the acquisition of that land and spent a good amount of time planning the potential expansion, but even expansion beyond the resorts, the build out of a mixed use development in that area. All of which would take decades to come to fruition because of the size of the town and the pace of growth. But really started working on that early on. And then, believing that we were going to drive the resort to the results we ultimately did and that we would need to expand, but didn't actually close on the purchase of the land and begin development and planning for it until really late 2020, early 2021.
But at that point, you had not seen the results from your renovations. So you were ahead of your time in betting on what this could turn into.
Well, remember, I was on the ground, so I was seeing the results in real time. We saw through 2018, 2019, even the first part of 2020 where the trajectory was. And then the second half, or the second and third quarter of 2020 is when COVID was really uncertain. But by late 2020 and early 2021, we saw the return in the direction things were heading. So yes, there's some risk taking there, and there's some, making a bet or a belief on the things we're already working on that aren't quite done, but believing and knowing that we think they are going to get done. So, some of these things did run in parallel.
So, David, Pagosa is not really near anything. It's kind of off in the corner of Colorado. Where are all these guests coming from?
We get guests from all over the country now. Primarily, they're coming from the states immediately around Pagosa. So Colorado first, New Mexico and Texas are the second and third, and they kind of swap places just depending on season and what's going on. Arizona is also a strong contributor. Utah is a good contributor. So it's really a 8, 10, even 12-hour drive market there are people that are coming. We also have the benefit, the Durango Airport, which really the La Plata Airport. It's only an hour away from Pagosa. It's accessible. Major airlines fly there. And we have a ski resort in Pagosa, really just outside of Pagosa, 30 minutes outside, that is known for the most snow in all of Colorado. So we have a kind of a winter scene. The Wolf Creek Ski Resort is a family-owned and wonderfully run mountain, and it draws real skiers. It doesn't have your crazy known terrains like some of the big name places, but we think it's a wonderful mountain, and a lot of other people do as well.
And so people can go combine the skiing with a visit to the Hot Springs Resort.
Yes, in the winter, absolutely, very common.
And all of the pools at Pagosa are hot springs pools, or are some of them just regular water?
In our expansion, we added 3 pools that are not geothermal. So, but we'd say 50 because we have more than 50 water features. We have a really neat what we call contrast falls. It's a waterfall feature that has geothermal hot water on one side and cold river water on the other. So you can have a hot and cold waterfall experience and kind of be doused in both.
That's amazing.
So we'll say water features sometimes because we have more than just the pools, but we do have really 50 geothermal pools, but we have a couple, 3 pools in the spa that are not geothermal. And we did that intentionally so that we could have a room in the spa for anyone who so desired that was, didn't have the mineral waters in it, and therefore the moisture and the environment could be maintained kind of a little bit more sterile or clean, if you will. Um, but we also have a set of geothermal pools immediately adjacent to the spa that are for spa guests. And we have uniquely an indoor geothermal water therapy pool that is for spa guests as well, and water treatments. So we found a combination there of what we thought was the right fit for this higher end spa offering.
Really good to hear that explained. Thank you. So, when you took over Pagosa, were there spa treatment areas? Were people getting massages or other treatments there?
There were, yes. There was a spa with 6 treatment rooms. It wasn't physically connected to the bathhouse or the hotel, and so you had to leave to walk across the parking lot to get to it. But it was on property, part of the resort. And I think at the heart of the spa offering is the amazing massage therapists and practitioners who make it special. And so the physical plant may not have been as desirable as anyone wanted, but they were still known for amazing treatments. It was a wonderful day to be able to open the new spa because it really felt like this geothermal um, environment and high-end spa setting that's one of a kind. 2 stories where the bottom floor where the pools are and the treatment rooms walks right out onto the river. It's just an amazing setting, and it felt like we finally had a setting that matched the talent of our team, and it was great to see.
You're right. I mean, guests don't come back because of the decor of your building. It's the therapists that bring them back. But the pictures are nice too when it looks good. How many treatment rooms does Pagosa have now?
Now there's 12.
12. So you doubled that as well. You started to work with Dr. Marcus Copeland at some point. I mean, did you want to have some more evidence-based or medical, if you will, credibility?
Yeah, well, it started with wanting to have somebody with Dr. Copland's kind of unique background, naturopathic doctor, extremely passionate about balneology and the use of mineral springs for healing. Have somebody with his unique skill set reviewing and providing guidance on our wellness growth. We wanted to provide offerings that didn't just sound cool, but actually contributed to a guest having a positively impactful stay with us and taking away an experience that didn't just make them think or feel better, but they actually were better, better outcomes. And so it started there, but Dr. Copland's been an amazing contributor beyond just that unique wellness programming. And I think having him review and provide guidance on the type of offering provided a basis for the credibility you speak of, because what we are doing is guided by somebody with his background.
Yeah, excellent. No, I think it makes sense, especially now that we have guests coming to our properties who are very well versed in what we're doing. And, they have the internet in their pocket and they look things up. And you do want to be able to say, we don't just look pretty, we're making you better, as you said, not just feel better, but we're making you better. It's obviously working because Pagosa has continued to succeed.
Well, I think the other thing, Lisa, that's important, we may get to this in a bit, but in the United States, I think the majority of U.S. consumers view hot springs as a novelty and a leisure activity. Whereas if we look internationally, there are so many examples of healthy communities and cultures that are centered around hot springs and geothermal therapies, whether it's the sauna culture from the Nordic countries, whether it's Japanese onsen culture, Turkish bathhouses, and even dating back to our indigenous populations using hot springs as healing waters and sacred lands, which is what we found at Pagosa Springs. It was a designated, safe almost holy land that there was no warring, and people would bring their wounded there to heal. And so I say that because having someone like Dr. Copland or Sharon join our team is it's about a bigger investment in the education of the consumer in the United States, that hot springs and water-based wellness can and should serve as the center of a nature or natural-based wellness practice or lifestyle.
That's so well said and spotted, David. I agree. It's very common in the rest of the world that water contrast therapy is part of a healthcare practice. And we have hot springs in the United States, and those few pockets people knew about in Saratoga or Arkansas. But you're right. People didn't go to them. It was like something that was done in the 50s or 60s, and it kind of fell out of favor for whatever reason. But I suppose we've benefited from the younger consumer today wanting what they consider natural remedies and not, drugs or pharmacology solutions to things. And they're finding that this works. So at this point, Pagosa is fully built out. What year is that?
Well, we opened the expansion in April of 2025, so a little over a year ago, and we've owned the resort for 8 years.
So let's turn to your other big project, Murrieta Hot Springs. And can you walk us through? That must have been happening concurrently while you were building out Pagosa.
It was. It was the summer or early fall of 2020. Again, after the dust had settled a little bit around COVID as it relates to our business and the visitation. And I just conversations with our team. We have quarterly strategic leadership meetings and annual retreats that we do, and around those moments, we have time to reflect. And it really just dawned on me that between our general manager, our leader of marketing, Sharon Holtz joining our team as our leader of spa and wellness, Dr. Copland, we had really pulled together a great group of people and leaders in a space that were ripe to do more, and not just to maximize Pagosa Springs, but to do other things. And it wasn't our plan originally. When we purchased the resort in Pagosa, I had intended to be passive. We had a third-party manager we brought in and even partnered with to run the resort. But the need to solve unique business problems in this day visitation, wellness, hot spring hospitality space, there isn't a manager in the country who has that playbook. They don't have that. So we had to get more and more involved, and in doing so, build the team internally. And that's when it was clear at that time in 2020 that there was just opportunity out there and on our team to do more. And so then it was early 2021 that I came across the Murrieta Hot Springs Resort, which at the time was a Bible college and had been for 27, almost 30 years, closed to the public. It was being marketed for sale, but as an infill redevelopment project where either a college or university would come and just use it again as a college, or a developer would come and scrape the land and build apartments and mixed use. And I visited the property once. I immediately went to the wells and the springs and understood what the water was. And with the water of the volume and temperature that it was and the quality that it seemed very clear to me that this could easily be, I shouldn't say easily, but this should be repurposed as it was originally designed. The Gunther family built it in 1906 and ran it as a hot spring wellness destination through the late 60s, early 70s. And that's how it was designed and built until it then changed hands and was sold and ultimately the Bible college. So to me, it had an architectural character and a history to it that was very much suited for a wellness destination. And we're just so fortunate it happened to also have hot springs at the center of it. So we put that under contract in 2021, bought it in 2022, and began construction in 2023 to then open it in 2024.
Pretty good, though. I mean, it takes so long to get the permitting and the design. I've read that it had 46 acres. It had historic buildings. But as you say, it had not been a resort for many years. I mean, how did you decide where to begin with what you needed to do?
Yeah, that was one of the challenges with a property like this is we could have easily spent twice as much as we did if we would have focused on every single inch and every square footage of every building across the property. And we had to make conscious choices about what's our core business, what are the things that contribute to that core business. There's a 16, almost 1,700 person conference center on the property. And fortunately, if it's only 10 years old, it's in amazing condition. But we didn't have to put a lot into that. There are areas, gathering areas, and banquet halls on the property that we didn't choose to refinish in the original phase because they weren't going to get put to use, and they still aren't necessarily because we have other available space. Where we focused was the core offering: the pools, the water, the bathhouse, the spa, and the hotel rooms, and renovating the existing buildings to bring 150 hotel rooms to life there at the property.
And how many water features does Murrieta offer?
We also have over 50 pools in Murrieta.
So the number of rooms and pools is very similar to Pagosa. How about the spa, the size of the spa?
14 treatment rooms.
So very similar. So did you feel that that size had a sweet spot to it, David, in your experience?
Yeah, I wish I could say there was that wisdom to it, but this was an existing property of a certain size. And so it just so happened that it worked out. I will say, in terms of water features, we did want to, we wanted to get to something 40-ish or more. It just felt like it's the appropriate scale for the number of visitors and the size of the property. But at that property, we have a few more traditional pools. There are two large pools on the property that one was already in existence and one is new. And those are traditional pools, not geothermal pools. And we think that's important in the Southern California setting because it gets to 100 degrees sometimes in the summers. And you want to have those plus cold plunges and cold shower features and other pools that are more refresh pools as opposed to the geothermal pools. So
let's speak for a moment about the complexity of geothermal resources. You and I were at the Hot Springs conference. I've been to, hundreds of conferences in my life. I never had geophysicists come and speak about fracturing and finding your water. And it made me think about the complication of that we don't have in traditional spa. You turn on the lights, the water runs out of the faucet, we're good to go. I mean, what challenges does it present to have a resort operating on a geothermal model?
Yeah, we have to remember that nature is dynamic. It's not fixed. And so the first thing we focused on in our due diligence for the Murrieta Hot Springs Resort, as well as the expansion in Pagosa, was what is our water resource? How certain are we of it? How will we design that system, manage that system so that it is run efficiently and that the water can be kind of unadulterated and pure to the pool while maintaining temperature that the guest wants? And so really, I think that's the difference maker. It's obviously the difference maker in our offering, but also in the design. Is the water is the central theme through all of what we talk about and think about. To the broader discussions that we had at the conference, every state has different water rights and different governing bodies, and that adds a layer of complexity to, I think, the consideration of development or building out of hot springs properties. Makes it difficult to scale. I'll say that because you got to do it differently in every state.
Well, we have that model in our country in so many ways. I mean, I appreciate how the states evolved. Being from Philadelphia, I understand when we signed the declaration what the intent was, but it is complicated in a business setting to have 50 sets of rules to navigate. At Murrieta, where are your guests coming from?
Primarily Southern California, San Diego, LA, and all of the adjoining communities to each of those.
Not a very long drive time from LA?
No, it's an hour from San Diego and it's an hour and a half from LA, kind of downtown proper. So, That was I think one of the benefits of that particular resort and that location is there are 22 million people within about a less than 3 hour
That's a
drive.
lot of people.
So it provides a good market for us to provide a unique offering.
What did you learn at Pagosa that you were able to leverage when you did Murrieta?
Well, we've talked about some of it. Team, culture, water first, coming out of is probably a carryover from the senior living space, but the people who oftentimes do what feels like thankless work in that space are the ones that make a difference in the lives of our senior living resident. I think not dissimilar. It's the team on the property that engage with guests every day that take an experience from being this is a pretty place to this was an unforgettable experience. We have a superpower, and that is the water, and that it has naturally relaxing and beneficial components to it that aid in sleep and happiness and relaxation. But it's the interactions with the team. And so the success in Pagosa, one of the things I'm most proud of is we have over 12,000 uh, guest reviews with a average rating of it's been 4.8 for the last 3 years running. And historically, I think we're 4.6 to 4.7, even including the guest reviews prior to our acquisition. So the team has done an amazing job of achieving guest satisfaction. But behind that, what's not reported is we have an AES score or associate engagement score that speaks to engagement of employees and teams that I would put up against any of the top operators out there. We score in the 90s across all departments on a regular basis. So it was that team and that culture and just the passion for making an impact on people that we really wanted to bring first and foremost. But we also learned on the opposite side, the guest and the customer in Southern California is different. I almost say very different than Southern Colorado. There's a different expectation and definition of what health and wellness means. There's a different time constraint when you can drive to Murrieta in an hour versus having to make a trip in a destination vacation field to Pagosa. So meeting the customer where they are and delivering an experience to them, it's not directly translatable from one property to the other. And so those are some of the things that we're still working to get right or get better.
That's really insightful. Let's talk a little bit about finances in general. I mean, your model has the overnight guests, the heads and beds of traditional hotels. You've got day visitors, you have local members, you have the spa treatments. I mean, what is the importance of that mix in your financial model?
It's easy to break the components apart and look at one individually and say, hey, look at this unit and how profitable it is or is not as a standalone. But what can't happen is that we're able to achieve by putting them together is the scale and the ability to impact an entire experience of a guest. If I'm a spa guest, I can go there, I can get a treatment at a standalone spa. Then I got to go eat somewhere else. I got to sleep somewhere else. And I don't smoke, right? And so same thing, whether it's a gym or a hotel, I leave to go get the experience. By putting the pieces together, we can allow someone to come and truly unplug and have all of the pieces of the puzzle in there, whether it's a few hours unplug and retreat or a multi-day retreat. They can have all of the offerings necessary there in one setting. So we really see it as necessary and important to creating a comprehensive and impactful wellness experience.
Were there any areas of this hospitality offering like, the staffing or the F&B or revenue management and pricing, were any more complicated than you had anticipated?
Yeah. Marketing remains, I think, and complicated is the right way to describe it because we're driving guests or want to drive guests through our marketing function to visit the property, but we're trying to drive guests who are going to come for a day versus additionally guests who want to come for multi-night stays and retreats. But the bigger challenge is we're doing all of this with a backdrop of a consumer in the United States, like we talked earlier, not necessarily understanding the value proposition of a nature-based hot spring geothermal natural water setting. And so we're also having to educate in this process. So we're building a brand while trying to drive business, and doing that through the natural seasonality that occurs, which means different customers at different times of year. So there's a lot to this, to the marketing of it. I think that's one piece. And the other thing is that's different or challenging would be, California is a unique operating environment that has impacts on labor, insurance costs, and other factors. We believe that the property and the location and the consumer overall outweighs the benefits that outweigh those additional challenges and obstacles. It's a real operating challenge that's different than any other state I've worked in.
Very true. I've had plenty of experience myself as a consultant in California, and it's like, oh, really? You want to open in California? I mean, it has great weather and a huge population, but a host of operating challenges, to be sure. So give us the big picture about you as an investor, what you've spent. Are you making it back? I mean, are they profitable? Are they operations cash flow positive? Like, what's the situation and how long would it take for you to get to the result you'd really like to see?
Well, with any growing business, you're investing back into the business at each of those stages of growth. We have been profitable throughout this journey. The amount of profit is the question, right? And so as we're now in a ramp up stage at both the expansion and Murrieta, we're in a stage of growth. And so we're investing and have invested in that growth. And now we're seeing that growth occur, but it'll take time. Prior to opening the expansions, fortunately, the businesses are great businesses. They have solid operating margins. And as I was sharing about Pagosa originally, we were selling out, sold out for huge swaths of the year. And so it was a very strong and performing asset. But we also understood we could sit and just kind of let that roll. But we had reached a ceiling, if you recall me talking about. We'd kind of reached our pricing cap and we had reached our occupancy caps. And so it didn't feel like we were going to provide ourselves much opportunity if we didn't take a positive step forward. So, yeah, both properties are in good shape. I would love to see us. I think we see it at a macro level. There's been a pullback of consumer spending, and particularly in the middle income, even upper middle income brackets. And so I think that things are a bit slower now for some of these what are considered discretionary type activities. I look forward to the day when we view these things not as discretionary, but as core components to a healthy lifestyle, because the value of a couple days stay at one of our resorts that it has on mental and physical well-being when you get back into the grind is tremendous. And I think we need more of that in this country.
But there's initial cash outlay is pretty substantial. I mean, great to hear that they are cash flow positive and profitable, but I mean, you've got massive millions of dollars of investment, and how long does it take to get the horizon for that?
So with both properties, we've been fortunate because from the beginning, we've aligned with capital partners and investors who understand and believe in the longer term value proposition here. And so none of these properties were designed to have a defined, we're selling in 5 years or we're selling in 7 years. It has always been about building the value of the underlying asset and utilizing the free cash flow once they are fully ramped, as it was before the growth phases and as it will be after the growth phases. How long does it take to get the back? I mean, we have returns expected. Well, we've returned capital to all of our original investors before we opened the expansion from the original acquisition. And so depending on the wave and the visitation numbers, several years to longer. But again, unlike some investment types, we didn't build this to be a exit in a certain number of years in order to get the return. We built this as a cash flow, ongoing return model for long-term value appreciation. Is an exit possible at some point in the future? Sure, but it's not predefined, and we'll choose that time when it fits best for us.
Well, it's so refreshing to hear you share this, David. I appreciate your honesty. And it's important because we have so many people in the US, at least, want to open not massive resorts like you're doing, but just talk about simple bathhouses. And, conventional lenders and institutional investors are not very comfortable with lending to these assets. And so we have a challenge, like there's a demand for it. The ones that are open are doing well, yet we can't seem to convince the money to come our way. What do we need to do differently?
Overall, it will come in time because the broader the set of assets are that are in this space that have records that can be looked at and demonstrate profitability, the easier it is for capital and investors to place money there. But this is the story of all businesses and all investment types. There's the leading edge, then there's the early adopters. And I think we're in the early adopter stage. And there are people who are making investment decisions based on broader trends they see and believe in, despite the fact that there isn't a 100 wellness property index that tells you exactly how things are trending in profitability. There aren't established metrics for profit margins at various levels. There isn't an established cap rate range for these asset types or operating income multiplier for valuations. Those will all come in time, but the early adopter investors, they're able to they're able to get through that analysis by looking, getting really into the business itself and understanding how much of this demand and this customer is momentary, how much of it has staying power, how much do I believe it's going to be here in 5 or 10 years and grow. I think as owner operators and developers, we have to find the examples that are parallel to what we're doing that serve as reference points and provide data points that can be looked at, not to answer the question entirely because it can't be answered until we're after the fact, until the results have come in, but to at least demonstrate, likely connections or at least directionally where things are going.
Well, we have to thank you for setting the stage and helping us get some of these metrics showing, the potential of these properties, which will make lenders more comfortable. Are there any more hot springs resurgent properties on the Olympus radar right now?
The short answer is maybe. We're taking some time after the expansion to let everybody kind of breathe a little bit. But my partner and I have begun looking at a few opportunities with no deadlines in mind, but we just began opening up possibility to explore new things. I think in the coming years, we'll very likely pursue some other opportunities so long as they align with what we're trying to accomplish, feel like they're a good fit for us and the team, and feel like things we can add value to.
Well, that's good news. It sounds like you're not in a big hurry to get out of the vertical that you're in. So that's good. Good to hear. I'd say my last closing question, if you look back on your early training in finance and real estate, what skills were most useful when you transition into this new area you're in of wellness hospitality?
I think who you work with matters, almost maybe matters most. As we start businesses, sometimes we feel like, oh, to make this work, my only option is to go down a certain path or to take this and work with this investor because they're the only ones at the table right now. And I think it's important that we do our absolute best to work with people who are aligned, truly aligned with not just the business idea, but the way of working, the way of advancing an idea. I think that's a big one. I think I was fortunate with the finance background because I learned through enough practice to kind of dispassionately underwrite and analyze opportunities. And I feel like I can at least largely do that for things even that I am extremely passionate about. But I always will take something I'm passionate about that I think I've underwritten well and ask people to pick it apart and tear holes in it. And that can be uncomfortable because as an entrepreneur, you want to just go your path and believe in it. But it's important that we open ourselves up to that feedback. But be thoughtful about who you get the feedback from. It's easy to find naysayers. It's harder to find critical thinkers who can provide constructive criticism while being supportive of where you're going. And if they need to tell you that's not a great idea, you need to hear that, but you want to hear it from somebody you can respect and trust. So, yeah, finding some resources like that are important.
That's excellent sage advice, because you do need to separate the passion from the numbers at some point. And yet it's really helpful to love what you're doing, which you clearly do.
Makes it a lot easier to deal with the difficult times when you love what you're doing.
Well, and you're making the difference in the lives of all the people that visit your resorts. So we thank you for that. David Dronet, managing partner of Olympus Real Estate, thank you so much for joining us today. That was really, really insightful conversation, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Lisa. Great talking with you.
You too.